heck's wrong with Jeep? I hate to even ask the question. I'm a fan of the brand. My first vehicle when I turned 18 that I paid my own money for was a Jeep. My best friend at the time had a Jeep. I've been a fan for a long time, but if you want the answer to the question, I think it's hubris. I don't think they know what they are. I don't think they know what they want to be. And I think that, well, the executives in charge believe their own legacy. They believe their stuff doesn't stink. It's easy to look at Jeep's history and think of them as always being a profit center, much like they have been for Stellantis now and Fiat Chrysler beforehand, but it wasn't always that case. After World War II, Jeep had an international reputation. They were a freedom machine. GIs wanted them when they came home, and, well, Jeep started selling civilian versions, the CJs, the 2, the 5, the 7. And along the way, Jeep created some other products, the Jeepster and the Wagoneer. But they changed hands multiple times until eventually being owned by AMC. Then famously, they created the Cherokee, setting the template for successful SUVs right as that craze was kicking off. It was unibody, it was comfortable, but it was capable off-road as well. Then they started developing the Grand Cherokee, and Chrysler wanted a piece of that. So they ended up buying AMC and got the Grand Cherokee. They had a fantastic lineup, came out with the square body Wranglers. And that was kind of a heyday for Jeep sales. But keep in mind that at that time, with that lineup, they were only selling about 150,000 units a year. Good enough, but not the runaway success I think that we think of when we think of Jeep and their fame, honestly. So Chrysler had their bankruptcy, and I imagine a situation where somewhere in here, executives sitting around a big table with cigars and air conditioning all went, wait a minute, we have a worldwide famous brand like Land Rover. We've got an SUV-centered brand at a time when SUVs are going crazy. We need more. We need to come out with more product. And it is a totally rational and reasonable business decision. And you can't fault them for that. So they did. They started expanding their lineup. Unfortunately, most of what they came out with was pretty miserable. Now, forgive me for getting the chronology wrong here, but they came out with the Cherokee, what should be one of their most heralded designs now. Well, one of my friends called it an abomination that shouldn't wear the name. They came out with the Renegade, the Compass, the Patriot, the Liberty, and unfortunately, a lot of these kind of worked. They weren't very good in many cases, but it increased Jeep's marginal sales. And they found themselves in a weird situation that many companies would envy. They had a famous name, products that weren't terribly good based on other products in many cases, but not all, and they could sell them for basically whatever they felt like. And it makes sense that they came up with the trail-rated slogan. The idea that some Jeeps are going to be off-road ready and some are going to be more for tootling around down the highway, because that's how most people used their SUVs. Again, totally reasonable expectation. The problem is those products they came out with weren't terribly good. Now, it's probably a slightly unfair comparison, but let's look at the Compass versus, say, the Honda CR-V. These products, based many times on Fiat platforms, but not always, unrefined, less powerful engines, transmissions, cheaper interior materials, they didn't compare very favorably, and for the most part, weren't a deal compared to, say, the CR-V or the RAV4. Now, the Compass especially, I think it's gotten much better, and I think it looks a lot better now, but their sales, in a bubble, don't sound too bad. They sell by themselves in that 150,000 unit range. At least they did. That's not bad until you compare it to the CRV, which sells in the 300 to 400,000 unit range. And so that's part of the problem, is they didn't have to hold back on their pricing, but they still increased their sales based on the name Jeep. And so in this period, what's happened is their sales peaked in 2018 at nearly 1 million units. But it's been falling ever since. And alarm bells are going off in Stellantis over this, trying to figure out what's going wrong and how to fix it. Well, the fact is, they've got a somewhat bad product line, some exceptional products, but they're charging like they're Land Rover, and they're not. I did a video where I talked about the Wrangler, and as I recall, if you take a 1994 Wrangler and add some inflation to it, the Wrangler today should be about $25,000 for a base level. Well, the base level for the Wrangler is actually in the mid-30s. And good luck finding that. I've spot checked around different dealerships, and with all of the little add-ons, the little options that in many cases I think should be included, you're talking about a mid-40s to $50,000 vehicle for a Wrangler. And then you add on some of their other products. The Grand Cherokee, the new one, is really nice, especially the interior. But does it really stand out compared to many of its competitors? And it's a little on the expensive side. And then they came up with the Wagoneer. Now, it's a great idea to bring back that nameplate. And you could certainly look at Chevy and say, hey, they've got the Tahoe, the Suburban, Cadillac with their Escalades. Why not come out with a larger one, more luxurious? And that's true. So they came out with something that you can option it up to nearly 6 figures. Hasn't been well received in the market. So Jeep is somewhere between a Renegade that's cheap and a Wagoneer that's nearly $100,000. Are they a luxury brand or not? I don't think they know. Are they an off-road brand or not? I don't think they know. They've been trading on the Jeep name because they found themselves in that enviable position where they could sell anything, basically 100,000 units a year, just because it was a Jeep. And they could charge basically whatever they felt like at the same time. But it appears those days are coming to an end because sales from that 1 million peak approximately in 2018 have fallen to the mid-600,000s in 2023. A 30% sales decrease. And I think what's happened is that people have finally looked at the prices and said, Jeeps just aren't worth it. Also, I'd like to add Jeep's styling. They've alternately tried several different styles, like if you think about the Cherokee, for example. Not the Grand Cherokee, but the Cherokee. But then when they come out with the Wagoneer, they want to harken back to the old Wagoneers. They seem trapped by their heritage, by the styling of the past, and not knowing exactly where to take it, where to innovate with the next legendary Jeep styling. They've had some false starts along the way. They had of course, the Liberty, then they had the Renegade, then they had the Cherokee. And with the Wagoneer, aiming for the price range they're aiming for, they ended up with something that looks, well, an awful lot like a school bus to me. So, what the heck's wrong with Jeep? Well, they've got to start believing in their legacy, but stop believing in the lie of their heritage. They can't sell based on the Jeep name the same way Rolls-Royce or even Land Rover can. They're not. They were not a premium brand. It makes sense for a brand to try to move up market, to move up to higher priced products for increased profitability. You can't fault them for that. But you can if they leave their core constituency behind in the process. And I feel that's kind of what's happened to them. I feel that they've lost sight of what they were and where they were going. Jeeps were never cheap. They weren't Suzuki Samurais, but they weren't Land Rovers along the way either. And they've just completely lost track of that. I believe that when you look back over the last 20 some odd years, maybe 30 years, they had perfectly reasonable business decisions for what they did. All of which are, like I said, coming home to roost right now. So what does the future hold for them? Well, I think it's a couple different things. First is they need to focus on product, building excellent products, not just products that are good enough to get some incremental sales. I think they need to focus on cost controls. They've let it go out of control, thinking that they had infinite ability to make a profit and to price their cars, and they don't. And there's a wrong way and a right way to do that. The wrong way is take some old platforms that aren't really appropriate, stick some old engines in them, cheapen out the interiors, and then sell it for whatever your best competitor is selling for. I think Jeep's past that. I don't think they can do that. I think they really need to focus on a lineup that makes sense. I'm not opposed to Jeep stretching from a cheap car to an expensive one. Think about what Chevy does with the Trax up to the Suburban. I think Jeep can do that. As long as they've got a core of products that are there for the off-roaders, for the freedom people, for those who want to go out in nature and experience what Jeep originally meant. But it makes sense for them to have more luxury vehicles, more cheaper urban-oriented vehicles, but they're just not focusing on being the best at what they do. That's something AMC used to do, of scrabbling together parts to create a new product. But Stellantis, Chrysler, Jeep, Fiat, they have the resources to be among the best. They just have to decide to do so. And those cost controls, if you're going to ask for the best price, you got to offer the best product along the way. What's wrong with Jeep? Hubris. And I think it's going to be a hard fall for them to come back to ground. Let me know what you think below.